All right, all right. We're up. Get all the bright, flashy things on. Gonna test some audio levels real quick before we get started. Gonna play around a little bit and just look at my bar and make sure nothing goes crazy. Yeah, it looks fine. Looks like everything is going to sound okay. If anyone is in the chat already, let me know if everything sounds alright before we get started. I would hate to get started and everything sound terrible. Or I guess I can just play it on my phone. Good point too. Sweet. Sounds good. We'll leave that up. Well, I guess we'll talk first. To get the whole stream started, this is just going to run through most of what we talk about at Atlanta Quest Snare auditions. So, mainly focusing on snare drum and specifically talking about the concepts that we expect our auditionees to show a kind of sufficient mastery of, and then all of the exercises will kind of run through what you might be expected to play if you showed up for an in-person audition, say in 2021. So let's go ahead and first thing that we're going to talk about is just some of the hand shape stuff and some of the set position and placement stuff that we generally kind of teach and preach here. And throughout this whole process, if anyone is watching, feel free to ask a question in the chat. I have the chat pulled up on my streaming laptop right now. So feel free to ask a question in the chat, and I can kind of dive into questions as we pass through certain topics, and we can make it all work and mesh in a good way. So first thing I want to kind of talk about is our general set position. This is really, really basic. We'll go through this stuff super, super fast, right? We're just looking for the natural place that our arms fall when we exhale and relax and breathe out. From here, we will just leave our elbows in the exact same spot where they already are, and then we'll take the hands and bend from the elbow and place them to where they are close to your drum, right? And this is essentially where we want the upper arm on both sides to sit. We don't want the elbows to push out super far in order to create a specific angle. We're not looking for anything specific in that regard. We just want to make sure that everything is equally as relaxed, equally as soft as it normally is. Keep looking at my laptop, not looking at the camera. Equally as relaxed and soft as it normally is when we just relax our arms by our sides. So with that, hand shape for the right and hand shape for the left, a little bit different obviously because we hold traditional grip, right? So we just kind of talk about gently cradling the stick. We'll place the stick in our hand, maybe 2 or 3 fingers hanging out of the back, and then we will lightly curl the fingers and connect with the soft fingertip. So we're not looking to crank the finger all the way around and firmly grasp it with the shaft of the finger. We're just looking for a really, really soft little touch with the fingertips, right? Mash grip is pretty easy for most of us. We close most of the gaps in our hand. We may relax and drop the index finger when we play because we're looking for a generally balanced hand shape where we feel like things are held as close to the middle as possible or evenly balanced across all of our fingers. We'll talk more about that here in a second. For the left hand, traditional grip, right, if we just relax our arms by our sides and bring our hand up so that way our left is next to the drum, we'll just throw the stick deep back in that pocket, the webbing between the thumb and the index finger. And this is our main holding point for where we're going to hold our traditional grip. And we'll talk more about why we want this to be our main holding point later. From here, we'll just kind of take the bottom fingers and curl them underneath the stick so that way the cuticle of the ring finger, right where the nail meets the skin, will sit right underneath the stick. We'll curl the other two fingers on top of the stick, and then we will softly connect our thumb tip to our index finger. Where on the index finger is totally up to you, somewhere in between the first and the second knuckle, right? Trying to make sure that if you have long fingers, it may be more comfortable to sit further back. If you have really small fingers, it may be more comfortable to sit further up. Whatever is best for you. I generally sit in between the first and the second digit. That's all the hand shape stuff and technique stuff that we teach. Everything else is kind of up to the individual player, as long as it sounds good. So that's that. What we look for first is what I call a balanced hand shape. And like I was saying earlier, if you want to say anything in the chat or ask a question, feel free to. So first thing that I kind of talk about is just generally a balanced hand shape, where if we just play a normal legato stroke exercise in the right hand, where we turn and initiate the wrist, this is already generally a very balanced hand shape for us. It's easy for us to, with match grip, evenly displace energy throughout all of the fingers, and then just utilize the wrist and hinge from this point. Everything feels really, really nice. Nothing feels like it's pressurized downwards or backwards in a strange way that is going to stop you from naturally rebounding the stick. Snare drummers, a lot of the time, encounter a problem trying to find the balanced hand shape within the left traditional grip, right? And so the main thing I want to talk about with this is what you can do to balance your left hand traditional grip a little bit more. And this is specifically oriented towards people who feel like they have a lot of trouble with tap pyramid, right? If you feel like you fizzle out super fast, or you just can't help but dive down into the tip of the thumb and pressing the thumb individually rather than rotating the whole hand, right? Those individuals may be helped a little bit by trying to think about a more balanced hand shape. Generally, if you struggle with stuff like tap pyramid, it's because your hand shape is relatively unbalanced, and or you feel like you aren't holding the stick necessarily with the webbing between the thumb and the index finger, but more so the pairing of these three fingers around the stick. It is the bottom finger, the index finger, and the thumb that are all sort of responsible for holding the stick together, rather than just allowing the back of the hand primarily to be responsible for moving the stick. One reason why I think this hand shape, where the thumb is pushed back a little bit, is a little bit more balanced for us, is because we can feel generally a post from the tip of the middle finger all the way to the back of the forearm. So if I just held my fingertip on the tip of my middle finger and rotated my hand back and forth, my thumb and my pinky would rotate in opposition to each other, and they would essentially be a center point, right? This is going to be the rotation in our left hand that feels the most comfortable and the most natural for our left hand and our body to do, because traditional grip generally is not a very natural type of grip. So that's the type of rotation that we want to try to access in order to make something like tap pyramid or faster twitchy phrases a little bit more accessible. Right. So we'll check that out here in a second. We got one question. My biggest issue is knowing if I have the best technique or if my chops just aren't what they need to be. I feel generally it's almost always some sort of technique issue and or issue with just your general hand shape or the feel that you have when you play a phrase rather than your chops. After you've gone through the process of marching in high school and you've had to work hard to play, difficult or dense phrases for the first time, you'll usually leave high school with a pretty good set of chops. And from that point on, it's figuring out how to hone those chops and utilize them in the right way. Or in this case, fix some of the technique things or motion things or hand shape things that may be hindering you still from playing some of the things that you felt like you could play, or wanted to play really bad in high school. Back to the balanced hand shape thing and the left, right? If we're looking for that balanced feeling in the left traditional grip where we're rotating in opposition to each other and we're clamping just a little bit in that thumb to index finger area, then that starts to give us wrist activation and wrist turn in almost every little thing that we do. Right? right? And it helps us utilize that feeling of a connected muscle grouping, which we'll talk more about in a second too, where we feel like the wrist is connected to the forearm and the turn of the wrist creates some natural reaction in the forearm. That's something that is very difficult to feel when we bail to the thumb tip or we balance the hand forwards and utilize that a lot. And that's not necessarily a bad thing to use fingertip for some of the taps that you play. But in most defined techniques in the marching, world, we're going to want to rely on the wrist as much as possible because it's the easiest way to make everyone's hands move in a similar fashion. What do we got? I've been teaching the complete opposite, so it's very eye-opening to hear about the difference in a balanced/unbalanced hand shape. Sure, and this phrase isn't like necessarily like trademarked in any way. This is just what I would consider it to be when it's generally balanced or unbalanced. One where we can find as much of a centered and natural rotation that works along with what the body already wants to do, rather than finding some type of rotation that flops weight around in a certain way or pushes unevenly from the front of the hand that causes it to move against what the body naturally wants to do, and you can't necessarily get the same rebound out of things like that. So with the left hand, we grip a lot from the back. We try to get that balanced rotation. It gives us wrist activation, and we get that natural reaction from the muscle in the back of the forearm for generally most of the taps that we play. The biggest benefit to this is that it relieves the fingers of almost any responsibility when you play most of your normal taps. This means that you can take your fingers and keep them as relaxed and jiggly as you want, and then just make the nicest, softest little curled hand shape in the left. And the reason that this is super awesome and important is that our right hand is already really good at this. Our right hand is already really good with match grip at cradling the stick lightly, getting soft, delicate contact with the stick, and allowing the implement to resonate fully and still put your full weight behind it. So the ability to relax the fingertips that much in the traditional grip in the left hand is a huge opportunity to get the same resonance out of the stick that your right hand naturally gets, right? And this is what we're trying to access out of the left most of the time when we feel like we have that tight left sound quality, or that, that left hand never really sounds the same as the right. We can never really get it there. And most of the time, I think it's an issue with just the hand shape in general, finding that nice balanced rotation point and being able to relieve the fingers of some responsibility so they don't feel like they're always just gripping down on the stick or responsible for pushing the stick up when we rotate. When we have that balanced hand shape and the thumb can crank back just a little bit, it allows us to just turn the hand backwards. We don't have to use the bottom fingers to actually launch the stick upwards anymore. And so all of this can stay really soft. And so for some people, that ends up equating to a very, very open and spread hand shape. You can see a bunch of Santa Clara Vanguard guys use this type of hand shape where the fingers just kind of fall off and everything just, flexes and moves around the stick because it's the back of the hand, the general wrist turn, and then the light assistance of the tip of the index finger that is responsible for most of the stuff that they do. So, balanced hand shape, we're looking for as much of a centered rotation as possible. Let's try to make this concise and summarized, right? We're trying to look for centered rotation. Our right hand already gets a really relaxed and comfortable centered rotation where nothing feels too forward pushed or backwards pulled. The left hand struggles to find this because we have to access this post, right? The centered rotation of the left forearm that allows the hand to move in opposition on both sides. When we crank the thumb backwards a little bit and have this one firm connection for where we hold the stick, it allows us to access that rotation a little bit and get a more balanced left hand grip that is mostly wrist turn focused and that has a natural reaction from the forearm. So that's what we want at AQ. That's generally what we talk about and what we look for, so that way you're not just using fingertip all the time and getting potentially thinner and less weighty or full sounds than some of the guys who are actually practicing this type of hand shape. So beyond that, we got two things really, really quickly to talk about that are super basic for most people. Concept of velocity versus space. Oh, hello, Connor Holmes. Sorry, I didn't see your message. Oh, new follower, Connor Holmes, 451. Thanks, Connor. I'm glad the alerts work. That makes me happy. And cool, it changed the thing at the top too. You can see your name now as the newest Twitch follower. Bingo! We're making moves. Alright. Back to the drum concept. Velocity versus space. Right? This is something super basic for a lot of people, but not all the time do we see it in auditionees here in Georgia. And so when we play big 8/8/16, full velocity strokes, there's a lot of physical distance between the beat and the head when we're at this forte to fortissimo height. And so we have a lot of opportunity within that space to create velocity with the wrist. And it makes it easy for us to take up all of that space comfortably and get a nice relaxed wrist turn throughout the whole thing. As we decrease in height, or decrease in physical space between the beat and the head, and we get lower and lower, we have less and less opportunity to get velocity. And that seems like it's super simple and it makes a lot of sense right now, but you'll be surprised by how many people just put a ton of velocity into their piano or their mezzo piano heights, specifically because they've been told that they need to have a really, really full piano sound or a really, really full mezzo piano sound. Here at Quest, we really prioritize our dynamic contrast, and using this velocity to space type of idea is really, really helpful for us. So as we get lower and closer to the drum, we move the stick slower, right? We don't move the stick as fast at mezzo forte as we do when we play at full out. And we certainly don't try to move it very fast when we're playing at piano. Because for us, generally, it is super okay to get a quiet piano sound and to get a soft mezzo piano sound. And as we go above that, starting to add the velocity slowly back into the wrist. So that way, when we play accent to tap phrases, like we do in our double beat exercise, FD singles, we have an ability to move really fast, crank the velocity in the wrist for cha-cha, and then slow the wrist down and evenly take up that small rebound space at piano. Which suddenly makes these taps way more delicate, softer, easier for our muscles to handle than if we just cranked the velocity out for and really tried to get that full sound that a lot of us are looking for. I'm gonna look at the chat real quick. I'm moving out to Atlanta after I graduate college next semester. I marched 1 season of WGI and 2 WGI and 2 DCI. And I was going to give up on drumming, honestly, but I think I'm going to go for AQ. You should come out, man. We drum a lot, and we drum some fun stuff. You know, it's definitely a good time out here. We all just like to, play together and, enjoy drums. All right, so summarizing that concept, which is important, velocity versus space. As we play bigger, we move the stick faster, right? As we play lower, we move the stick slower, specifically to create dynamic contrast within our height system. As we play big, we get a lot of full volume, big volume, because we're moving the stick with a lot of velocity. As we play lower, we are moving the stick slower and therefore getting a softer dynamic with less of that velocity. So on the concept of those quiet taps, how would you define the relationship between sound quality and volume? So, sure, absolutely, free Zack lesson time. Absolutely, free Zack lesson time. That's the live stream. So on the concept of those quiet taps, how would you define the relationship between sound quality and volume? So sound quality to me is kind of, it's an arbitrary label. It's not necessarily, sound quality doesn't necessarily equate fullness, because we just call it full. I think sound quality for us at Atlanta Quest is a sound definition. You know, the sound quality of something is something's quality of sound. And so if we wanted to play piano taps, we would say, what sound definition do we want to assign for these piano taps? What do we want it to sound like? Generally, we use some sort of metaphor for something like that, very Mike Jackson-esque. We want it to be delicate. We want it to be like, the drapes on your windows blowing in the breeze. And so for us, that would not equate to velocity. And so the proper sound quality for our quiet taps would be slow, generally quiet, rather than trying to force out a certain sound quality that we didn't define. So, yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to. Sound quality is just its assigned volume and its assigned quality of sound, rather than it being the fullness of the sound itself. So, hopefully, that made a little bit of sense into how we think about it. Cool. Finishing up with velocity and space, that's just the idea. As we get lower, we move the stick slower. As we get higher, we move the stick faster. Next one is weight and speed, and this one seems pretty sensible too for most people. If we're playing at a very, very slow tempo, we would allow the natural weight of bigger muscle groupings, the natural weight of the jiggly muscles within our wrist and our forearm and our hand to all kind of work in tandem with each other to create a weighty stroke. Where even at piano, I could get that soft sound quality or sound definition when playing with some weight to the drum, even at a slow tempo. Trying to access as much of this weight as I possibly can without hindering the natural stroke that I've currently already defined. So when we play faster and we start to crank the tempo, that natural weight is not something that we want to keep necessarily in our hands. So we will lighten up around the stick. We will try to get less of that natural weight and more of just the softer flicking of the muscle, flexing itself. And so when playing quicker, 8/8/16 or something like, we would generally use less weight. We would play lighter on the faster tempo than we would on something like. And so just like velocity and space, I think that one's a pretty simple one for most people. Most people don't keep that weight in their hand all the time when they play at the faster tempos. They naturally let their hands lighten up and soften up as they get to those faster speeds. But we try to outline that a little bit and conceptualize it as weight versus speed, the same way that we kind of talk about velocity versus space. And so that kind of covers us just generally moving the stick at different tempos and at different heights, and how we think about the stick motion and what it should be when we're playing just legato strokes or 8/8/16. What about staying loose and soft when doing really choppy stuff? Generally, that just comes from finding something that we were kind of talking about earlier, the balanced hand shape. You want to find the rotation that works most comfortably with what your body already naturally does. And there are some things about drumming that you just have to work out a little bit and get your muscles comfortable with for the first time before it finally feels good. But there are some things that we can do to make it actually work along with what our body is already good at doing. So in our right hand, we get that knocking on the door sensation, and we allow there to be a natural reaction from the forearm. So that way the effort required from the wrist dissipates naturally up through the body, rather than being stopped by a flexed forearm as we try to crank the wrist by itself. Same thing with the left hand traditional grip. We're looking for a centered rotation as much as possible, and one point, mainly a fulcrum, where we're holding the stick. And so we try to get that opposing rotation in the left hand that sits a little bit further back in an effort to balance the stick more, instead of holding it with a grip that falls forward on the front of the hand. So you can go back on the stream earlier once this is all done and check out some of the more detailed talk on the balanced hand shape stuff that we said, because there's probably a good 15 minutes of that somewhere in there. Well, cool. Last thing that we have about the hand shape and movement stuff and set position stuff before we get into actual exercises is general muscle grouping connectivity. And this is something that I actually have a hard time finding people do really, really well. To me, it seems pretty natural that when we turn the wrist and we flex the wrist in our right hand for match grip, right, we activate the wrist up and down from this one joint, that there's going to be a natural reaction from the forearm, right? We can actually see this muscle bouncing up and down in the back of the forearm as a reaction to the wrist. So it doesn't make much sense to me when we're trying to move the wrist up and down to actively flex the forearm in any way or stop the forearm from jiggling and moving along with the wrist's natural rotation. Wrist is connected to forearm, so we will allow them to move in tandem when they have to operate together. At Atlanta Quest, when we play at Forte and get above that Meso Forte 9 inches area, we let the hand leave set position, right? We get some natural arm assistance. Because of that, now we're hinging from the elbow. We're not just hinging from the wrist. We hinge from the elbow and allow the hand to leave set position, which means that the forearm is moving. There should be a natural reaction of some kind from the right upper arm, the bicep, right? And so we can actually see that flexing and moving up and down as the hand leaves set position and drops. And so when playing normal exercises, accent tap, 8/8/16, one thing that we look for in people when they drum is those who, when they play at the bigger heights, are not only just cranking the wrist or cranking the wrist and lifting a little bit of the forearm, but maybe closing down the upper arm, but someone who looks like they understand the connectivity and the fluidity between wrist to forearm to upper arm to shoulder to neck, and make it more of a full body activity, right? One thing that I generally kind of equate it to is drum set players. I never see drum set players, or not very often, see drum set players in gigs who will sit back in their drum set throne and not move their body at all. Just flex their hands and then move their sticks around with as little motion as possible. Almost every drum set player I watch is really animated and makes it a full body activity. One, because they have to navigate around this axis more, but two, because it makes it more comfortable to stay in time, it makes it more comfortable to perform, and it makes it more comfortable to just operate like your body is the instrument, right? Like you're responsible for making the drums do the sound, and so you are the instrument. And so when we play normal stuff like exercises like 8/8/16, accent tap, we will generally look for as much of that natural muscle connectivity as possible, recognizing the wrist is connected to the forearm, forearm to upper arm to shoulder, and all of those things. It's okay to move them in tandem naturally with each other, as long as we focus on mostly a wrist initiation to lead our stroke, to move the stick the same way as everybody else, and we make it feel as natural as we can. So that's most of the hand shape and set position stuff that we would talk about when running Atlanta Quest auditions, right? Balanced hand shape, a centered rotation from right hand, that centered rotation, and left traditional grip, and that grip that's maybe a little further back in that left thumb than most people would expect to help hold the stick in place and get that wrist rotation with every note. We have velocity versus space. If it's bigger, you move it faster. If it's lower, you move it slower, right? Super easy, really easy to conceptualize. Weight versus speed. If we're playing slow, natural weight can bleed into the implement and help us take up that space slowly. If we're playing really fast, take that weight away. Play with a light, delicate touch and really soften up your grip around the stick to allow the stick to bounce and to allow your muscles to flick extra, extra fast. All of that seems pretty sensible to us. And the last one being that muscle grouping connectivity talk. Trying to make it a full body activity, trying to make it a very natural performance, make it as comfortable as possible, because in the end, whatever feels most comfortable is going to be the most consistent. What we do the first time is likely going to be the one that we would love to define if we could, because we always do it that way the first time. So that's most of that stuff. We'll kind of move on to talking about exercises. Just some basic breakdowns of stuff that we would probably ask people to play, and gradually step it up into some of the more complicated stick control patterns, and then, showing some of the AQ exercises, and then maybe the excerpt that the Snares had to play at their callbacks this past weekend. So we'll kind of talk about all that stuff. Let me take a sip of water real quick. I gotta hydrate. It's been cool to see so many people pass through. Let's see, Silver the Flame, F yeah, about to teach a lesson. I'll warm up the mind by listening to you talk about drums. Sweet. It's awesome. Does anyone else think he is quiet? I have him maxed and I can't hear him. Let's see. I can turn it up a little bit. There we go. We'll go up 3 dB. Hopefully that's at least a little bit better. My friend Dawson made AQ this weekend. I marched next to him at Stars. He did indeed. He did indeed make AQ this weekend. A teeny quiet. Let me know if that's any better. I can always boost it more. It's only a little swipe on my trackpad. I'm also further away from my mic than I normally am. I normally sit up right up against it, so I have to have the drum distance. Well, cool. So we'll talk more about exercises now. Let's we do a lot of 4-2-1 patterns, right? This is super simple skeleton that we can make a lot of exercises out of and a lot of different stick control patterns out of. And so we'll talk about the general structure of it quickly, and then we'll run through some of the patterns that we play often. So 4-2-1 is just 4 counts of something, 4 counts of an A pattern, and then 4 counts of a B pattern. So the first pattern that we would play, just to get everyone going generally, is eighth notes to triplets, right? Starting with big eighth notes at the forte height. We play 4 counts of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you would play 4 counts of triplets down at piano, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, you would do that twice just because it's pretty short to play 1 bar of each. So you would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be the 4s of our 4-2-1 skeleton, right? We move on to the 2s. So now we have 2 counts of each. 2 counts of eighth notes, 1, 2, 2 counts of triplets, 1, 2. Do the same thing again, 1, 2, same thing again, 1, 2. So we only do the 2s twice, just like the 4s. May seem a little short for the 2s, but it connects into a comfortable exercise when we add the 1s at the end. So far, we have the 4s and the 2s. We do it for 4 counts each twice, and then we do it for 2 counts each twice. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. That's where we're at so far. Last chunk is the 1s. We play 1 count of eighth notes, 1 count of triplet. That means we play the next set of eighth notes off the left, bum bum, and we play the triplets off the left, da da da, and then we play it off the right again. So we do the 1s 4 times. Right, left, triplet, left, right, triplet, 1. So overall, sounds like this for the 1s. Right? We'll go back at the beginning and we'll play it all the way through a couple of times. Just the eighth notes to triplet 4-2-1. I'm actually going to get a met going. Hopefully it won't be too loud. I'll try to keep it quiet. So that way if you want to play along, you can. Basic eighth note triplet 4-2-1. Sweet deal. Give it a little volume boost since everything's going together. Cool. So, that's the basic 4-2-1 structure. That's what it sounds like with eighth notes to triplets, right? We start with just that skeleton to get everyone going, and then beyond that, we would try to add double strokes to it and see how comfortable people feel with playing even double stroke rolls and controlling that big rebound at the forte height. And then playing at 3 inches and controlling the rebound at that low, soft height. So really quickly, we'll play the exact same thing again, but playing roll throughout the entire thing. Here we go. And so hopefully, if you have been watching from earlier and you were here for some of the hand shape and movement and motion talks and set position talks, you can see some decent example of what I was talking about within my playing. The connectivity of muscle groupings, shifting velocity at specific heights to help with our dynamic contrast, a generally balanced hand shape that helps me stay relaxed when I play faster roll patterns or bigger double stroke rolls. But hopefully, some of the words that we've been saying, you can kind of see now as we play throughout the exercise that you can look out for. So that's the general structure that we would just start with. Eighth notes to triplets, empty, eighth notes to triplets with rolls. You can do it forwards, you can do it backwards, right? You can have people like count the alphabet out loud while they do it. Beyond just the general 4-2-1 structure, at Atlanta Quest, we typically expect auditionees to kind of show up with some understanding of the triplet grid and the 16th note grid. Being able to play triplet with a shifting accent. Through the 4-2-1 structure, and the same thing with 16th notes. So that way they could at least, follow along with the patterns and do some of the stuff that we'd ask them to do. Beyond that, we kind of immediately move into stick control and see how good snare drummers are at playing different patterns, different rudiments, transitioning through different ideas, and maintaining a consistent feel to the hand or a consistent sense of that rebound control that they need to play it. And so one really great example of that is our sextuplet control exercise that has the 4-2-1 structure, right? We have the first pattern, which is just 6 singles. Sorry, I worded that poorly. 4 sets of singles, 6 notes per grouping. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Then we have paradiddle diddles immediately after that. And then we have double paradiddles. And then we have padadas, so right, left, left, right, left, left. And the last one is Shirley Murphy's, so it's 5 patterns total. And so we would try to play those all back to back, trying to maintain a really consistent feel to the hand. As we move throughout all of those different taps, right, we have a lot of different stickings on the taps, we have a lot of different patterns that we have to move through, but trying to make sure that we're utilizing the definitions and the natural rebound of the stick that we would have used if we were playing something very normal, like basic double stroke rolls or basic 8/8-16, rather than tensing up a lot or creating a brand new type of technique specifically to achieve just this pattern. And so I'll play just through the 4s real quick so you can hear all those patterns connected. Do that same thing again. especially the Shirley Murphys at the end, pretty tough to keep a consistent hand feel on your approach from the 1 that we're already pretty good at, the 2 within the paradiddles and some of the padadas, and the 3s now in the Shirley Murphys. Most people immediately shift technique, experience some sort of dipping forwards of the hand shape, or really, really over flexing the thumb to try to achieve that low 3. And so when asking people to play this in auditions at Atlanta Quest, that's absolutely something that I would hone in on and look for immediately, is someone's ability to maintain that tap consistency. And so one really good thing to practice is that same exercise with the 4-2-1 breakdown, but playing it all at piano. So keeping it all at the same height, defining your piano touch in the first pattern, trying to figure out what do I need to do to play all the patterns consistently. Let's try to set a feeling here. And use that feeling for as long as possible throughout all of the different patterns when you transition. Which is a really, really tough thing to do, to play an exercise like that all the way through super evenly. So we're going to try it a couple of times. This one is one that you do at a super slow tempo. And I guess the pressure's kind of on to do it live, because it's not easy. We got the Met on 90 beats per minute. We got Stumpy Lodge says, "Yo, cover Bleed by Meshuggah." I totally should. That'd be kind of sick, actually. Here we go. All the way through the 6-tuplet timing exercise, or stick control. We'll do the whole 4-2-1, right? So we've got the 4s, we got the 2s, we got the 1s. I'll kind of call them out as we pass through, and we'll try it. 4s. Paradiddle diddle. 2s. Repeat. Ones. Ooh, that's tough. We'll do that same thing again. It's hard to kind of talk and do the same thing. Twos. Repeat. Ones. We'll do it one time with the accents, Make it a little bit easier because we can pop out the energy with the hands. Oh gosh. It's almost like as much of a memory thing as it is a hand control thing. Just remembering as you count through the 5 patterns which one you're on, which one you're transitioning to. We might ask people to try it off the left. I think I remember that happening one season, and that tripped some people up. So definitely good 4-2-1 skeleton stick control exercise to experiment with and see how well you can keep that really good tap consistency, that soft, delicate feel to the hand. Beyond that, we kind of do another 4-2-1 that's similar to it, a stick control one that's just double strokes. We would just play right hand double stroke roll for a bar for the fours, and we would go into a right hand inverted roll, so starting with the right hand tap into the left hand doubles. Now we have the left hand lead doubles for the third pattern, and then an inverted left hand roll, so the left hand tap into the right hand doubles for the fourth pattern. And so the idea is to transition between all four of those with as little of a technique shift, as little of a weight change, as little of a difference in the hand from pattern 1 to 4. My cat's just running around. So I'll play the fours real quick a couple of times so we can hear it. Doubles. Inverted. Oh gosh. Inverted. Left. Inverted. Again. Doubles. Inverted. Left. Inverted. Left, right. And so that's the fours of it. Whoops. We would also ask people to go through the twos and the ones, so doing 2 counts of the right, inverted, left hand inverted. Same thing with the ones. And so this one I'll definitely play through a couple of times once this person stops calling me. So we'll set the tempo, we'll try to figure out what's comfortable. 130, 130. We'll go and try it. We'll keep it at like a nice relaxed mezzo forte height. Just so we can keep, the hand soft, focus on the rebound, keeping the motion of the hand where we feel the balanced rotation the same every single note. Here we go, whole 4-2-1. I'll do the same thing again, but I'll kind of call out where the fours, the twos, and the ones are as I pass through them. Kundai, I'm so sad that you didn't get the bell notification. Well, you're here now, and the stream VOD, it will always be in the playlist. So you can go back and listen to some of the chats that we had earlier about it. Here we go, same thing again. 4-2-1 all the way through. Twos. Repeat. Ones. Repeat. Repeat. Oh my gosh, hard to say it. Repeat. 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 I need to practice that. I'm just gonna say repeat over and over again for the ones. Here's just the ones. Repeat. 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 A couple more times. Repeat. 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 Cool, let's do it from the beginning. Whole 4-2-1. Whole 4-2-1. Fours. Twos. Repeat. Ones. Oh no. That's a really, really cool learned skill, is to be able to just have normal conversation while you play. So not only do we play it at the mezzo forte height, we would probably crank it faster as well, and look at the hand consistency when we get up to, the 160 range. Maybe down closer to piano now. Nice. Fun stuff. Cool. So that's that 4-2-1. Straight double strokes, inverted right hand, left hand double strokes, inverted left hand. Really, really good to kind of show off the stick control. One version of that I made the snares do at the callback camp the past weekend that I saw them was doing the same thing, but decrescendoing and crescendoing every single bar as they pass through it. So if you go back down to the slower tempo, starting with the fours, it would sound like, right? And then we crescendo for the next pattern. And left hand. And then inverted. Which is a really, really tough one. And that really shows off a lot of like velocity control, right? We talked earlier about velocity in space. The higher you are off the drum, the more opportunity to get a fast wrist flick and manipulate velocity to your advantage. The lower you are, the less opportunity you have, the more sensitive you have to be to your speed and to how fast you flick the wrist. So when you're really good at evenly controlling the dynamic shifts from up and down and changing hands evenly on all of the patterns, it really, really shows off some great maturity in the hands for something that's so difficult. And even I still slap some of the hand transitions sometimes when I confuse myself and think too fast. Right? Definitely makes it feel better. Damn, it's obvious I have not drummed in months. Good thing they raised the age limit on WGI age out. It is a good thing. It is a good thing. It happens, man. We all have to go through periods of not drumming sometimes. And for some of us, it's really, really good for us. It definitely was for me. I didn't march drum corps or really follow actual marching band for multiple years in the middle of my career. Good to take a break. Well, cool. So that's all the 4-2-1 patterns to kind of talk about immediately, right? We had eighth notes to triplets just to start the basics. Right, doing that stuff with rolls and double strokes and trying to fill them in with slightly different patterns. Trying to do the sextuplet control exercise, singles to paradiddle diddles, to double paradiddles, to puttitas, to Shirley Murphys, transitioning through all those different types of rudiments and patterns in the hand without shifting your feel, trying to have the same interpretation to the tap on all of those patterns. Beyond that, the last one that we had, besides playing that one at piano, was the double strokes that we just played. The accents I played intentionally, not because I'm bad. Cool. So we got one more exercise to kind of talk about before we get into the actual AQ exercises. All right, this one I'm stealing straight from the BK audition that I went to when I auditioned in 2017. I was lucky to make the line, but this exercise sure did almost cut me and show me some of my tendencies about over controlling the stick. So this one starts as a very, very basic patata exercise where we start with 4 patatas, same as like the 4-2-1 type of skeleton, and then 4 dadapas, starting with a right hand double, ending with a third partial accent, and then back down. This one is just super good because it points out a lot of the wrist control that most of us are already really good at. You have 2 very strict definitions. You have forte, where we're all good at cranking the velocity in the wrist and getting a snap, and then we have the piano definition, where we're trying to be really smooth, generally light in the hand at the at the faster tempos that we're kind of bouncing at, and not moving the stick super fast. Really, really kind of soft on the velocity. As we go through it, I'll play the 4-2-1 fully a couple of times so that way you can hear it. The intention is to then play the exact same skeleton over again, but with singles and alternating. And not from 12 to 3, like we would want to immediately, but from 9 to 6. Trying to take our ceiling down, use less velocity on all of our accents, snap it less, make it quieter, and bring our tap heights up. So we're trying to be more relaxed about our taps, allow them to come off the drum higher and bouncier and fuller. And so rather than it sounding like the 12 and 3 version that we just played, it would sound way more muddy and just in this middle range. Which a lot of people seem to have a really hard time with immediately. Some desire to keep the hand shape very firm and controlled, and to really, really strain the wrist in order to control the 9 to 6 height, when the easiest way to play from 9 to 6 is to allow the stick to bounce back up into the same range, which takes a very, very relaxed cage in the hand, a soft hand shape, delicate fingers, maybe a little bit more open than you would like, a willingness to let the stick bounce on its own rather than you trying to control it with your hand. And that was something that I really struggled with in auditions. I immediately, every time I played it, would flex my accents too hard and pop them up to forte, and I would over control my tap rebound, and I would bring it back down to 4 or 3. And so rather than it looking like this, it would turn into something like this. As hard as I tried, I would keep controlling more to try to get the heights to where they were supposed to be, and it didn't work out in my favor. My solution in the end was actually to control it less and just let the stick go up to what I feel like is a comfy 6+, and then give myself a little bit of that natural arm weight on the bump. And at that point, I was effectively controlling mezzo forte and mezzo piano and getting those 2 volumes consistently, and I had a really nice flow to the hands. And in the end, that was what worked best. And so that's what they wanted me to be doing from the very beginning, or what they had hoped that I would be doing from the very beginning, which I was not. So we'll talk through the 4-2-1 exercise with the patatas, and then we will do it with the alternating accents in the end. So firstly, just the 4s. We have the patata to the dadapa. So 4 of these, and then 4 of these. We'll do that same thing again. And so that's 4 full bars. We'll play just that. One more time. Perfect. So now we have the 2s. We're going to go just into 2 of the patatas, 2 of the dadapas. Same thing again. We're going to do the same thing again, so we have 4 of the repeats rather than just 2 of the repeats. And then we'll play the 1s to make them the same length as the 4s and the 2s 8 times. So we have 1 patata, 1 dadapa, repeat. So we'll play through the whole 4-2-1 so far with just the padadas and the dadapas from 12 to 3, and we'll say out loud when the 4s and the 2s and the 1s happen so you can kind of follow along. 4s. 2s. 1s. 1 more time. 4s. 2s. 1s. Cool. At the end of that, there is a tag that makes it a little bit more complicated and generally throws people for a loop when we start to alternate it. We have 4 padadas and 2 dadapas. And we repeat that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1. Then we play 2 padadas and 4 dadapas. So we flip-flop it. Now instead of it being 4-2, 4-2, we have 2-4, 2-4. So it sounds like this. Or 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So play just those back to back. 4-2, 4-2, and 2-4, 2-4. 1, 2, whoops. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. One more. Awesome. So let's cut those in half. So now we have 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, 2-1. We'll repeat it 4 times because it's smaller. And then 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. 4 times once again because it's smaller. So we have 2 padadas, 1 dadapa. Same thing again. And then 1-2. And so whole pattern being 4-2, 4-2, 2-4, 2-4, and then 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. We'll play that whole tag portion where we split it unevenly between the hands and then cut it in half. We'll get the metronome on. Here you go. Just the tag portion. Sounds pretty cool when you put it all together. We'll do that a couple of times. One more. So that's just the tag. Generally, we would connect it together with the 4-2-1 and we play the 4-2-1 directly into that tag. So what we'll do is we'll get 1 rep of it with the padadas from the top all the way through the 4-2-1 of the tag. And then we'll play it again, alternating from 9 to 6. And see how comfortable we are at controlling the sticks in that middle range, actually expressing mezzo forte and mezzo piano with a nice even rebound that's smooth between the sticks, or if we have the tendency to over control those heights and clinch down with the hand. Here we go. putted us first. Hole 4-2-1 and the tag. Twos. Ones. Tag. It's long, a lot to think about, a lot of transitions in the hands. Let's do it alternating. This is at 180, by the way. Definitely a long one. We'll do the same thing again, alternating. Twos. Ones. Tag. So, after my experience at Blue Knights in 2017, knowing my struggle with that exercise and actually expressing a good, relaxed, comfortable mezzo forte and mezzo piano throughout that entire alternating pattern, I've brought it to Atlanta Quest, and we now use it for the snares every single year, just to evaluate someone's ability to let the stick bounce on its own. Not push it with the hand so much. You give it that little flick at the beginning, but overall, what's going to make this work the right way is actually allowing the stick to move by itself and you comfortably guiding it with the hand rather than actively pressing it or actively pushing it and trying to manipulate it where it's supposed to go. It will get there by itself. And this exercise is a great example of that. We play it at 180. Sometimes we play it a little bit faster, but I find it gets more comfortable the faster you get. You can snap the wrist a little bit more at the faster tempos. And get away with a little bit more control. So I do it at 180 often, just because it's on the slower side, and it really forces you to open up the hand shape and let the stick rebound true. And so it's just, I think, in the end, what we're looking for in snare drum land is, ultimate control over the stick. And allowing the stick to do what it wants sometimes may be the most efficient and best decision. And so if that's the case, we control the phrase better by controlling the stick less. We let the stick do what it wants because that's what helps us express the phrase the way that we want to, or make it feel the way that we want to. And so we just kind of set a sound definition or set a feel definition for most of the things that we play. And as long as the players feel like it's comfortable and natural to achieve that after a certain amount of work, then we'll play it that way. But we do what we can to make ultimately efficient decisions with our muscle groupings and do our best to work along with the things that our body already does naturally well, which is why we talk about that whole balanced hand shape idea in both of our hands and try to find the most comfortable, centered way to do things as often as possible. And so that exercise is a great way to kind of, like Zachary is saying in the chat, break away from just the two height formula, trying to be really strict about your phrasing, and trying to move into something that is more, we want to express this sound this way, so we'll do whatever we have to achieve it. And in this case, we want that sound to be softer on the accent side and bulkier on the tap side. and that gives you a very different feel in the hand. And so we use that to evaluate for sure. So last thing we got, we're already going for an hour and 12 minutes. So that's not bad at all. We've made good time. We have some of the AQ exercises. We're not going to play through all of them. We're just going to kind of talk about the ones that generally line up with the stuff that we've already talked about within our chats and hand shape and the velocity versus space concepts that we have, making sure that all of that still applies in the harder exercises. And then we'll play the final excerpt of Beat Soup, which is a spree that I wrote a long time ago in high school that we used to play with the snares this past weekend and see what they were good at. So let's play just FD singles really quickly, and we'll just talk lightly about some of the bigger chunks as we play through it, because it aligns a lot with the things that we've talked about conceptually at the beginning of the stream. So we'll take the MET down to 114. Very first thing that we have is a big high velocity legatos phrase. And we crank that off with both hands, trying to get every single stroke to come up to the exact same height. So the biggest thing I talk about is this idea of a secondary set position, right? Rather than trying to play pressed down, right, we are trying to play now lifted up, returning comfortably up to here as much as we can whenever we're in the middle of motion. Yes, they were all playing Beat Soup, and they didn't do a bad job. Not too bad at all. So we'll play just the beginning through that big high velocity legatos phrase, but it should align with a lot of the things that we were talking about. You'll see a lot of connected muscle groupings, right? A lot of wrist activity, a little lift from the arm, some bicep movement from both of my arms, and you'll see a lot of that velocity from the wrist because of how much space we have between the bead and the head. A lot of distance, big height. Cool. So after that, we have the accent tap phrase, which just mimics the approach that we use on big legatos at forte and small legatos at piano. And so we'll play just that next phrase. That one more time. Sweet. So after that, we move into a connected phrase with the hands where we play a couple different sticking patterns, and then we kind of end it with a big dynamic crescendo into a phrase change for our molar kind of single portion of the exercise. So we'll play it from the top all the way up to that chunk where we have our filled in singles. And like we were kind of talking about earlier, fits in our definitions for our velocity versus space, our weight versus speed, muscle grouping connectivity, a balanced hand shape as we move throughout most of that, trying to find as many of those things as possible. Here we go. Let me grab a pillow real quick. I need to raise my set position. Or I guess lower my set position by raising my body. I don't play as low as I used to, but I still play kind of low. Here we go. Do that same thing one more time, just so you can hear it. Yep. From there, we just have a decayed stroke portion of the exercise that we fill in with full singles. Sounds something like this. And there's nothing too special to note about this chunk besides just the breakdown that we use to practice it. We focus a lot on trying to feel it as double stops. Specifically to kind of organize the hands and get the preps together and get comfortable moving the hands the exact same way, getting the same feel from right to left. And then our job is just to displace the first note of those double stops without changing the hand feel. The left hand still has the same feeling and quality that it had on the double stop, but now it can fall down in between because of our shifted placement on the prep. And so we're just looking for that, graceful touch behind the stick and that consistency in the hand feel as they play throughout that whole singles phrase. So I'll get it once just so we can hear it and think about that a little bit. Do you change the left hand prep from the double stops to the singles? No, I don't. In the end, I feel like I could. I don't think there's anything wrong with changing the left hand prep into the singles, especially if it's easier for you in particular to define it that way. But I think for Atlanta Quest, we typically try to find as few technique transitions as possible. Right? If we don't have to make a new approach or a new definition for the hands, we won't. We'll try to stick with the same one. And so if we already have this feeling set up in the right hand for 4 of them, then we're just going to take that feeling and replicate that with the left hand for our double stops and use that same feeling for the singles. Specifically so that all 3 of them are the same definition and there's no shifting or changing in the interp from one to the other. So that's that chunk. We'll play it once from the top up to there. Fudge that last one. That's a tough phrase to play off the left. We'll play just the molar phrase one more time. Do you change the left-hand prep from the double stops to the singles? I don't know if you meant to send that twice, but no. No, I don't. All I do is shift. I shift it rhythmically. I do it later for the singles than I do for the double stops to create the new rhythm, but it's the same feel in the hand. So after that, we have that little solo moment, and then we go into our double stop phrase. The exact same feeling, right? Same definition we did before, right? Because if we don't have to create a new technique for it, we won't. We'll use the exact same thing we got on those molar singles from earlier. So we'll play just the next phrase. One more time. So, from right there to the end is really just about showing off the members' accent tap control and their ability to stay light on the low end as they transition through all of the sticking patterns. So we'll play from where we just left off to the very end of the exercise. We end with that left-hand shot, and then we go into this accent tap. Do that same thing a couple more times, just because it's a lot of stuff. Cool. So I'll go back to the top, and you can kind of see me transition through all of those different patterns. Hopefully I still got the chops for it, because these exercises are hard. Man, it's hard to not get hyped at the end of it just because you're glad you made it all the way through. It's just too many notes. But we like to show off the chops. And so I think, if you can make it all the way through that exercise comfortably and make it look like it's comfortable, make it move across the drum comfortably, it's just one of those things where it's like, you're good. We know you're good. It's pretty obvious that you're good. It shows that you have a lot of control over your touch. just as much as you have control over your chops and that you've got muscle. You know, you can play light where you're supposed to play light. You can you can make the right decisions to navigate through the passage effectively, which is always more of what we're looking for than just someone with a ton of muscles and a ton of chops. You know, I think everybody has a lot of chops. I think there are a lot of people out there with a ton of chops that don't know how to use them most effectively for themselves and for their own bodies. And so that's definitely one of those things that we prioritize and look for when auditioning at AQ. Well, cool. So there's that exercise. We'll play through the triplet rolls exercise real quick. The only thing I really wanted to outline about our triplet rolls approach is that we are looking for consistency and motion between our pressured stroke, whether it's a buzz or a diddle, and our tap. And so what we will generally do step by step to define our sound quality or sound definition for rolls is we'll say, what does it take for me to play a soft piano buzz? Or what does it take for me to play a soft piano double stroke roll? Because generally we'll expect people to know enough about their hands to play a good even double stroke roll. Once I know what is required of my hands to produce that feel and that sound, then I'll play the check that way. And that's the definition for the whole exercise. So there's not much changing in the hands besides the addition of a little bit of pressure, you know, or a slight shifting of feeling in the hand between check and double. But everything else is the exact same. And so if we take this feel and apply it to an open stroke, and then transition in between, we'll generally do a good job at getting the same consistent volume from transition and keep a consistent feeling in the hand that makes it easy to just focus on the moving of the triplet. So with that in mind, I'm going to play through all of NDA, our triplet rolls exercise at Quest, just so you can kind of see how my hands move through transitions and triplet roll patterns with that kind of technique idea in mind. Here we go. Ah! You tense up for one moment and it gets you, and it gets you. We'll do one more. We'll do one more at the faster tempo. With NDA, there's not only that tag portion at the end, but we do a faster 8 and 25 version. It's just focused on, can you maintain a nice legato touch behind your roll the entire time? And so I'll bump the tempo a little bit and play the first portion up into the faster speed. And so, just like before, surely you can at least see at least a decent example of some of that consistency of movement between pressured stroke and non-pressured stroke. Flashbacks to 17 when y'all had paradiddle diddles in those 6/4 bars. Yeah, those are fast tempo to do paradiddle diddles. Nice. That's funny. The this stream is kind of glitching a little bit and throwing extra messages in the chat. Cool. So that's 2 exercises, FD and NDA. Good examples of some of the movement things that we talked about earlier. We'll play through the Beat Soup excerpt that I had them play through, just so you can kind of see some of the harder things that they have to play. Maybe we'll play like an AQ break or 2, because I still remember some of those. Just to give an example of contextually what those technique things that we talked about, what the exercise things that we worked on would combine and build up towards eventually being in the music production or the show production. So let's see. What tempo do I want to do Beat Soup at? Yeah, 130 is fine. 130 is fine. And so it's not the whole spree. It's cut in half, essentially, and this is the first half of it, ending with a little tag. Do the same thing a couple more times. Not bad. Get it a little bit faster. That's at 130. I think I originally wrote it at 138. Ooh, gotta get one more of that. Gotta get one more. Tough stuff. Tough stuff. Those are the kinds of things that you can expect to play with the Atlanta Quest. Let me double check and make sure all this is working all right. Cool. Well, sweet deal. So, what else can we play? We can do the 18 snare break. I don't know what tempo that was at, so let's find it real quick. Couple music chunks from Atlanta Quest. Sure, this works. Ooh, got a little slow there. I don't even know if this is the right tempo. I think it's a little bit faster than that, actually. We'll try it even quicker. pretty close. Not too bad. And then we got some from last year. We got like the It's a fun one. Lots of tricks, lots of throwing stuff around. Pretty hype. We won't worry up with that. Nice. What was the last one? There was one more. This will be the last thing that we play for the night. Final AQ break. Correct. We'll do that one. Alright, cool. We'll start from the top. Sorry, water bottle. Didn't mean to hit you. One more time. Tough. Nice. Not too bad. Some hard stuff. Hard licks, hard exercises. Some good patterns that we've played through. 4-2-1s that we normally would have thrown at some of our auditionees. 8th notes to triplets. Double stroke it, roll it. Right, we got the 6-tuplet stick control exercise from singles to paradiddles to double paradiddles. Transitioning through those 5 patterns. Displaced doubles, right? Playing the double strokes, just shifting it 1 note, playing an inverted roll, left hand lead, left hand inverted roll, making the 4-2-1 out of it. And then talked through some of the basic concepts that we would generally talk about and like to see in most of our auditionees when they show up. You know, balanced hand shape, left hand traditional grip, looks like it rotates most of the time. It's not just flex from the thumb. You know, you can see that centered spin and that grip from the back of the hand and the back of the thumb. Right hand naturally knocking on the door, getting good response from the rest of the muscle groupings it's connected to. Right, velocity versus space. Someone who has good understanding of moving the stick faster when it's higher, slower when it's lower, right? When they play throughout their dynamic spectrum, they can use velocity as a tool to help them express their dynamics. When they're bigger, they get a louder sound because they get more velocity. When they're lower, they get a quieter sound because they use less velocity. That's a great rule for us. Weight versus speed, the next one. Making sure that we are ready for our transition from slow to fast. For slow, weight it up, baby. You know, let the bigger muscle groupings help you out and let that weight bleed into the hand, help you take up that space slowly. But as soon as you have to press on the gas for something faster, lighten up. Right? Be ready to take that weight away and get a more delicate touch around the stick. So that way the stick feels more responsible for the work and the stick bounces by itself rather than you having to manipulate it the whole time. And then last one being the muscle grouping connectivity, right? Trying to get your wrist to understand that it's connected to the forearm and it's okay to have a natural reaction here. And it's okay for when we lift our hand at a set position for that to have a natural reaction and movement in the upper arm. And the connection between all of those just helps us feel more fluid and comfortable when we play basic exercises. So that's definitely not something stylistically that we would discourage. We would like for people to show that type of connectivity in their performance and in their hands when they play music. just because it makes them feel more consistent and confident, and it shows up, and it seems like it's a really cool thing to play with in your hands. Well, I hope that everyone had a good time and learned something. This stream VOD will be up on the website, right? So no worries about that. You can go back and watch the whole thing again. And as well, if you've been watching on Twitch or YouTube, hop onto the other platform. Give me a follow on the other one if you're only on one of them. And head to live.zackrwatson.com if you need any of the old videos, any of the social media links, the way to get to places, live.zackrwatson.com. That's all I got. I gotta head out now. It's getting late, so I'm done with the drum stuff. It looks like the stream chat is in fact glitching out a little bit and repeating messages that people have sent in the past. So I may have missed something in the last like 20 minutes. May have not seen everybody's chats. Hopefully it works okay. Let me refresh the chat real quick, see if it actually comes up. Well, at least it doesn't have all the old stuff. Well, all right. That's all I got for the night. It's good seeing everybody. I'm out of here. If you have any questions, feel free to go to live.zackrwatson.com. There's a contact form there. There's social media there. You can follow me and send me anything that you want. If you're generous, you want to leave a donation or a tip, boom, you can do that there as well. Hey, I see a message. Perfect. Have a good night, boss. See you later.